All right, so this is the last video in chapter 9. This is where we left off with age stratification theories. So again, it's the view that there is unequal distribution of resources, power, and privilege based on age. The elderly doesn't get as much as the younger generations. There's not a lot of things for them to do. People discriminate or prejudiced against them as well. And of course, it can lead many elderly population to feel like they're insignificant in the community and that they are not valued. Keep in mind cultural differences. In some cultures, the elderly are highly revered and highly thought about, and they are considered the top of the social status. Where in other countries, Western culture especially, the tide's changing, but there for a while, he's just a crazy old man type of thing. So we have to keep that into account as well. So in less industrialized countries, cultural differences here, elderly are viewed more positively. So again, I'm just going to peruse through this real quick with you, cultural differences. Elderly still need to engage in meaningful activities. So in countries where the elderly are revered, they provide a lot of resources for them. Strong ideals are not always followed up with behavior. So sons and wives care for the elderly. Those with daughters face old age alone. Who's going to care for them? Because we know men typically on average die sooner than the wives. So who's going to care for those? And we see those issues more in individualistic cultures as well. Wisdom, I'm just going to go over this real quick with you. Wisdom is a little bit different than intelligence. Wisdom is seen as being some type of expert in a field of some way. Knowledge is based more on the here and now, using it to connect with individuals. Intelligence, the difference there is more used for logical thinking. So it's really kind of hard to define what wisdom is because it looks differently from one person to the next. Disengagement theory. So it's a gradual retreat, as your book calls it, or separation from society. So it's a theory that late adulthood marks gradual withdrawal from the world based on psychological, physiological, or some type of social level. Now, the researchers in gerontology, they all don't agree with this, and they say that it's not universal. Not all elderly want to disengage from society. It's really a personal preference in how people interact with their communities and their families around them. Then we have activity theory, is where the more active you are, the more active you will continue to be. So to be successful in the aging process, it occurs when people maintain interest, activities, and social interactions. So the more active you are, the more active you will continue to be. And the more satisfied with the aging process you will continue to have, unless there's some physical ailment that prevents you from forming close relationships and continuing to do the activities that you like and that what you've always done. So continuity theory is another theory based on successful aging. It's a compromise position, so people simply need to maintain their desired level of involvement in society to maximize their well-being and self-esteem. Again, having good physical health, good mental health, financial security is a big one in old age, sense of autonomy, independence, and having a positive outlook. Your attitude on things, especially as you get older, is really important to how it manifests in your life. And kind of look at that with your grandparents as well. Do they have more of a pessimistic outlook versus an optimistic outlook? And typically, behaviors and attitudes will fall in place with those. And then selective optimization with compensation. So Bates and Belts, they say people use selective optimization to overcome changes in old age. So people concentrate on one particular skill to try to really be really good at it because they overcompensate for that skill when they've lost some other skill. And as we get older, some things that we used to really be good at may not be the same anymore. So people will really try to overcompensate in one area because they can really do that skill well because they're lacking in some previous skill. And then you have Langer's theory of being mindfulness. So there's just some differences here. You can look at that in regards to mindfulness. How you see aging can really impact how you age. So if you see aging more positive or not a big deal, you typically will have a better outcome with aging versus if you see it in a more negative light as well. And again, cultural differences play into the mindfulness of how the elderly population see the aging process. All right, so daily life and late adulthood. We're going to peruse through this really quick because a lot of it is just day-to-day relationships, keeping those formed, things like that in regards to personality. So, of course, many elderly people want to continue to live at home. Only about 5% of the elderly do live in nursing homes. And again, it depends on many different factors. So their overall health, what kind of treatment they need, do they have the economic resources to be able to afford some of the nursing homes and the assisted livings that are out there. If you look in the Orange Park community here in Clay County, we have assisted living and nursing homes and independent elderly homes going up left and right. So it's a big growing population, but being able to afford that is another situation all in itself. So then we have specialized living environments. These are your nursing institutions. You can have adult daycare facilities where the family members still provide most of the care. They just don't want their elderly mother or father or grandparent sitting at home all day. So they go to an adult daycare or skilled nursing facilities where if they've had a stroke or some heart issues or some other type of medical situation, they go to these kind of skilled rehabs and they learn certain skills to get stronger. Institutionalism, again, this is nursing homes, and again, depending on economic resources. If you have a lot of money and your insurance that will pay for certain nursing homes, you'll get better care than state-funded nursing homes. And a lot of people have what they feel to be learned helplessness. There's a lot of apathy, no emotion, lack of resources. They're not going to get better, so why should I even try? The staff isn't helping them to get better. And so they just kind of wither away in those final few years. And some people just don't have the motivation. They don't have that support system to motivate them to want to get healthy and to be able to continue to live out the best of their abilities in their later years. So economics of late adulthood comes with a lot of different things. We have, depending on the state that you live in, the community that you live in, you have 10% of the elderly could live below the poverty line. Women, they're more than likely than men to live below the poverty line. And 25% of women live alone. And then 8% of whites live below the poverty line. We're talking about the elderly population too. 19% of Hispanics and 27% of African Americans live below the poverty line too. So again, typically whatever financial resources you had in middle adulthood will carry over into late adulthood as well. So here's just a graph. Official poverty measures in pink, supplemental, so with resources, what that looks like for the elderly population. So again, a lot of elderly, if they don't have retirement saved up, they're on Medicare or Medicaid, and then those insurances will transition. So a lot of them live on fixed income. The rising healthcare cost also chips away at their budget as they get older. A lot of people now have to pay for a little bit of their medical care where they used to not. have to be able to, and that faces them with another economic strain. And then work in retirement, older workers, combat discrimination from the younger workers. Some jobs have a mandatory retirement age where they will change jobs. Of course, it's discrimination to say, oh, you're 65, well, now you have to quit, working. That's illegal. But some jobs, especially if they're more physical jobs, will try to give older workers different jobs. And maybe the pay is different because they feel that they can no longer perform to the best of their abilities. Then you, of course, have to think about retirement and what characteristics that brings into place. So it's kind of filling a life of leisure is retirement. There's a lot of factors that go into retirement that your book talks about as well. Jobs can be stressful. That can lead to somebody deciding to retire, desire to travel, see family more, things like that. So all of these characteristics are important when one decides if they want to retire or not. And then there's stages of retirement as well. The honeymoon stage, when you first retire, oh, everything's great, I can go do this and that, all that kind of stuff. Then disenchantment, where after a while it's like, oh, retirement's not all what it cracked up to be, I have to watch my money, I have to do this, I have to do that. Then reorientation, where some people have to kind of reevaluate what they want in retirement. And then find a retirement routine. And then termination. So not everybody goes through these stages. The sequence isn't universal at all. You can go through any of the stages at any given time. So here's some factors of good retirement that you guys can go ahead and peruse through. And then the last bit is relationships, old and new. Marriage life, more men and women over 65 are married. 70% of women outlive their husbands, things like that. Partners that we've had for 40 plus years in marriage, one of the partners can die, or they can both be sick together, suffer medical issues that prevents them from continuing the activities that they used to do. But overall, marriage still reports to greater life satisfaction, even in late adulthood. So here's the differences between living patterns, living with a spouse for men versus women, living alone versus living with somebody else. So divorce, it can happen. It's a very small percentage, a little bit over 10%. Divorce typically is harder on women than men, especially in late adulthood. Dealing with retirement, too much togetherness, all that can be afflicted as well. And then caring for a spouse can impede the process too when you talk about life satisfaction. And then death of a spouse, of course, it's really hard when you have two people living together for years on end. Friendships, they matter a lot in late adulthood as well. They provide a lot of social support that other people typically wouldn't have. And then just kind of peruse the friendships, that family friendships, that characteristics that bring a lot of self and life satisfaction to those in the late adulthood, because again, their friendships are starting to decrease. And then the last thing I want to bring into play is elder abuse. It's very heavy on my heart. It occurs in 11% of the population. Any type of psychological or physical maltreatment or neglect. People with Alzheimer's are more susceptible at this. Best prevention, of course, is to take frequent breaks, ask for help, use community resources, things like that, because our elderly population do not need to feel like they are being taken advantage of, especially by friends or their family, because they need to feel love and belonging as much as they can as well. So it can be prevented, and if you suspect anybody who is going through it, it definitely needs to be reported to the authorities immediately. So this ends chapter 9. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to let me know, or we can schedule a conference to go over some concepts that you may need clarification on. I'll see you again for Chapter 10.